we'll talk about how far I got in the book as well. Hi
Oh,
everyone. Really happy to be live with Daniel Sellers. Do you want to start us off, Daniel, with an intro to you and your books?
yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Daniel Sellers, and I'm the author of two. I'm the author of two crime series. One is the Lola Harris Mysteries, which is set in Glasgow, and there are 4 books out in that series. But I'm here to talk about my new series with Alison and Busby. The Lollipop Man was published yesterday, and we launched it in Leeds, and Kaz was there on Wednesday evening. So the Lollipop Man is the first in my new series, and I've just finished writing the second one as well.
And it was kind of handy that I was there because I'm not meant to be doing tonight. And I've sort of stepped in. But it was good because that meant I could start reading the book.
How much have you read?
Well, I only started today. About 2 o'clock.
Right.
So this is, I'm giving myself all my defenses. But I'm about that far through.
Blimey. Right, I'll do a quiz.
I'm page 152.
That's good. That's good going. Much faster than me. I can only read fast if I'm doing audio. And then I can put it up to 1.5 speed if I'm getting bored.
Well, I don't know how people can do that. It's like people who watch videos on like a advanced. I don't understand it.
No, I can't do that. But audio. Sometimes the audio books. I was listening to a Stephen King book. It was The Stand, which I've never read. Well, when I read Stephen King, I was about 13, 14, and The Stand was just too intimidating because it's about 1,300 pages. And I listened to it about halfway through, and I thought, I another 27 hours of my life. So I turned it up, and I ended up on about 1.75 speed. I don't think it's his best book, personally. I think his best book is probably the one about JFK.
I like The Stand.
Do you?
Yeah. But
Salem's Lot is my other one that I love.
My favourite's Carrie.
Oh, is it? Yeah, that was the classic, wasn't it? Because that was his breakthrough.
We've already got loads of comments.
Have we? Where do you see these?
Well, they don't come up anymore on the side. Sorry. I'll read you them though. Sarah has said good evening.
Good evening.
To both of us. Fran has said hello.
Hello.
Marion said hello both. She loved the Lollipop Man. It's Marion Todd.
Oh, thank you. And Marion's been spying for me today. She found the Lollipop Man in St Andrews, Waterstones. So,
yay. Sally Ann Martin said hello. Donna said hello. And Sarah wants to know where Rasmus is this evening.
Rasmus is there because on the edge of the desk are the biscuits that I use to control him.
He's been very well behaved.
He's a good boy.
So we've from listening to you on Wednesday and then reading a bit of this, we've kind of got sort of slightly similar experiences growing up because you're from Leeds.
Yeah.
I grew up I'm not from Leeds, but lived here in the 80s and the 90s, which is the times you're writing about in this book. Not consistently. So I moved away for a while and then came back. I feel like there's a lot of like commonalities in our kind of experiences of the city that you're writing about. And
well, the second one is very much set in Leeds, much more than the first one. They kind of go to Leeds, but it's mainly Bradford, Halifax. And Halifax is really trendy now. It's like the trendy place to go in the north of England.
It is a peaceful. It's got like loads of stuff on, hasn't it? There's like it's the place to go for gigs.
It is, but not just that, trinkets, and it's lovely at Christmas and that sort of thing. So I don't want it to get too nice. I want to keep it a bit grim, really, for the sake of this series. It wasn't that grim.
No, you've got a lot of Bradford in it as well, though, haven't you? And there's bits of Bradford that I guess, can probably still meet the grim.
Oh, there's lots of everywhere has grim bits, and you know, even the nicest city centre with the fanciest shops, you can turn down a street and suddenly think, "Oh, I've come the wrong way. I shouldn't have come this way." And I really wanted in the first book to write about, because the book is set on the gay scene, and I really wanted to write about how marginalized that community, of which I am a part, was. You know, the gay pubs were down by the canal behind the station. It was dangerous to go there. You would go in 2s and 3s unless you were hammered, in which case you would just like stagger off on your own, which is what happens to Adrian in this book, and that's the start of his problems, really.
It definitely is. I've read that part. It's a good description of it being the start of it. It's not really the start of his problems, though, is it? Because it's fair to say his problems started a lot before they kind of come back to life.
Yeah, I mean, Adrian. So there's 2 main characters in the book. One is Adrian Brown. Adrian's 18. He's gay. He's failed 2 of his A levels, and he needs to resit them so he can get away to university. And you know, there's a lot of secrets and shadows in Adrian's past. He lives in this mill town, still living with his mum and dad. And he's desperate to get out of this town, partly because he's gay and he's not out, and he just doesn't feel he can be. You know, even in his workplace, this is 1994, he gets homophobic abuse off one of his colleagues. And, you know, that did happen. A friend of mine was working in a clothes shop in the late 90s in Leeds and was sacked because his manager found out that he was gay. She called him on one side and said, "I've heard you're gay. Is that true?" And that was his job. So there was no protection at all. So Adrian has another reason for wanting to get away. It's to escape his past, because when he was 10, 8 years ago, he was kidnapped briefly, but managed to escape. And he was kidnapped by a shadowy figure that the press and the community called the Lollipop Man, for reasons that will become clear if you read the book. And he never understood why he was let go. And it's been a shadow and a trauma. His parents even changed his name. He wasn't born Adrian. Adrian's his middle name. And so he's carried this great weight. But what happens at the beginning of the book when we start reading it is that a little girl has gone missing 8 years later. Nothing has happened. There's been no sign of the Lollipop Man in all that time, but there is a great suspicion in the media, by the police, the community, that the Lollipop Man might be back. So Adrian feels under huge personal pressure to come out, in inverted commas, as the only victim of the Lollipop Man who survived and got away. So that's where his problems started, Kaz. You're quite right. But yeah, he quickly ends up spiraling into all sorts of problems, and one huge ethical dilemma about 5 chapters in, when it all starts to go a bit crazy for him. And the other main character is Sheila Hargreaves, who is a lot older. She's 46. She's a TV presenter, but she used to be a crime reporter. She has things that she's ashamed of in her past as well. And she wants to try and stop the Lollipop Man now he's back. And she interviewed Adrian when he was a kid. She knows that he is the only person who saw the Lollipop Man, and so she means to try and find him. So the question is, how long will it be before those two their paths cross, and what will be the result of that meeting?
There's a really insightful bit in this that I read earlier, where Sheila's talking to her friend Jeanette, and they're talking about communities living in fear, and she said it's the future of how we live. In the Middle Ages, they had fools and cholera and such like. We have serial murderers.
Oh, you're going a bit muted, actually. I don't know if...
Right.
Just say that again. That's better.
So it said about Sheila saying in the Middle Ages they have wolves and cholera and such like. We have serial murders. That's why we live in communities live in fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an interesting thing because you kind of touch on real serial killers, don't you, in the book? Not in the sense like just as a comparison. You talk about like the Moors murderers and the Yorkshire Ripper. And...
Yeah, I couldn't not talk about them because it's their shadow that really does still hang over the north of England. Whole communities, not to mention families, were horribly affected. And that was, what, 60 years ago? And then there was the so-called Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe, who was convicted, I think, of killing 13 women, but possibly more, in the late 70s. And I grew up in Leeds. I was born in 1974, and I still have vivid memories of the fear that my mum had. And my mum's sister, actually, as well. She was training to be a radiographer at the university. So she was living in student accommodation. And when Jacqueline Hill was killed, I think she was a nursing student as well. My auntie came to stay with us over Christmas. Just before Christmas, it was the beginning of December, and she was coming on the bus. And I remember every time my mum heard a bus coming down the hill, she would run upstairs into the bedroom bay window to look out and see if she could see her sister so she could watch her, because she herself was too scared to go out to the bus stop. And then my auntie came and she basically lived with us. And then, luckily he was caught not long after that, but there was a real palpable fear in the city. And I wanted to put some of that into this book so that people understood why there was such a visceral reaction in the community to the idea that this individual, the lollipop man, might come back, and how people's dormant anxiety and anger can be electrified again all these years later by the idea that he's back. And that really does, I think, give the story energy in the beginning, and it sends Sheila and Adrian on these paths.
Well, I think there's not a family in kind of this area of Yorkshire, isn't there, that wouldn't have some kind of story about that time of like the Yorkshire Ripper and things like that. My dad helped to fix some of the computer things they used to process the evidence and things. And it's just, I think everyone, like I interviewed someone a while ago who'd written a book sort of set in the era, and they'd lived in Leeds at the time, and it didn't talk about the crimes, but it was set in that time, and I didn't even know if I wanted to read something set in that time, because it's still too, I think it's still too kind of at times too much if you sort of know this community.
Yeah, and buildings and places and streets are still there. So I was down in Leeds this past week, and I was driving around, walking around, and some of it hasn't changed. Some of it is unrecognizable, and there are whole new roads, and it's actually quite unnerving, because I've been living in 1994 in my head for the last couple of years, and it's hard to find your way around when you're expecting one thing to be there and it's not there anymore, or there's a new one-way system, something as simple as that. But there are parts of the city that won't have changed as much and that are recognizable, and where people have lived there for generations as well. It's really, really, really fascinating. And I talked the other night at the launch about the idea of West Yorkshire noir, and this is something that Judith, who was interviewing me, talked about. That there is this kind of gothic darkness in that part of West Yorkshire, whether it's Ted Hughes or Wuthering Heights. The Pennines are dark and wet and cold and windy, and Saddleworth Moor is just over the Pennines, and there's something about dark satanic mills. Thinking about Bradford and Halifax, these are great places. But there is a darkness there. I think it would be interesting to explore that a bit more.
There is, and I think that's why there's a lot of like amazing crime authors that are based around here. But then I always think of Yorkshire, possibly not as a native of here, maybe, so I see it differently, as being like a vibrant and friendly and like a really kind of close community feel. One of the reasons I still live here.
I mean, West Yorkshire in particular, I think, has its own character. North Yorkshire is kind of posh and and you know, the Dales and the North Yorkshire moors and the coast, and then West Yorkshire is very much mills and communities and towns in valleys, with canals running through the valleys as well. And so when you go between places, you're often going up and over and back down into the next community. So I suppose that forces people together. If you think about something like, is it the Rochdale Canal, you know, Hebden Bridge, Mytham Road, Sowerby Bridge, Halifax, really closely knit communities, physically closely knit, with often streets on very steep hills going up the sides of the hills. But yeah, and there are a lot of people living very close to each other as well. I mean, there's 4 or 5 big cities in West Yorkshire alone: Leeds, Bradford, Huddersfield, Halifax. Probably missed one out there. But you know what? Sorry,
it's like Wakefield as well, isn't it?
Wakefield, the other one, yeah. So you know, whereas North Yorkshire, it's all really spread out and farms. West Yorkshire is very tightly knit community, and of course a lot of the buildings in the towns were built close together for mill workers.
You've got, sorry, I'm trying to keep track of how many people are commenting and questions. So right. Laura Hamilton said hello to.
Hello. Oh, Laura, if that's Laura who I think it is, then Laura, the book was dedicated to Laura. So she and I experienced lots of aspects of West Yorkshire together, so she will recognize some of the things that happen.
It might be a different Laura. I think this one's Irish. So Marion wants to know what you think about giving real life serial killers nicknames. Does it give them a notoriety that borders on glamour?
That's a very interesting one. So Sally Ann, my friend Sally Ann Martin, the writer, and I were talking about this on Wednesday night, because in West Yorkshire there is a real pull away from calling Peter Sutcliffe the Yorkshire Ripper, because that it's sort of, you know, it's felt that there is a kudos to that brand when he was just a very pathetic, unpleasant individual. Publishers, I talk in the author's note. I do the usual caveat about you know, the usual caveat about none of this is based on anyone or anything. And I said, it's all the more important to stress that none of the characters is based on any real person. I do, however, make reference to Myra Hindley, Ian Brady, and Peter Sutcliffe, who were all too real and whose crimes continue to hang over the communities of the north of England. However, I think in some of the promotion, it has referenced the Yorkshire Ripper, and I think that's possibly just in terms of names that are known. But I personally make an effort to talk about Peter Sutcliffe, who was known as the Yorkshire Ripper, as opposed to talking in that way. There are loads and loads of cases, well, ones that I'm aware of in the north of England. There was a guy who used to break into people's houses, and he was called the Fox. And then there was somebody else who was called the Hare Hills Rat Catcher. And you know, I think a lot of this comes out of print media. You can imagine that, you know, these big sensational headlines.
You've got a character who's kind of, I think, what you imagine of the worst of print media.
Jeanette.
No, Jeanette's great. Is it Kevin? Kevin, the one who works at the smaller press with Adrian, and he's just like, he wants to be a tabloid journalist, and he's kind of got all the worst like characteristics of what you imagine a stereotypical tabloid journalist would have, and none of the redeeming features. Or none so far. He might get better. Like, as far as I've got, he's not a particularly pleasant person.
No, he's not. He's not. I think he's got a soft underbelly, and I think he is a bit like the stable boy at the ball. I think, he's working for a local free paper reporting. Sorry, the dog is wanting another biscuit. There we go. Good boy. He's working at a free paper and he's writing stories about the Women's Institute in Hebden Bridge and the opening of a new supermarket in Bradford. And he wants to be writing sensational stuff about an actress off EastEnders who's got into a scrape. He wants to be writing stuff like that. He's only 21. He's a junior reporter and he's on a training placement. The editor at the paper, sadly, isn't. Well, she has a lot going on in her own life as well, but she's kind of wary about reining him in. But luckily, she has a deputy called Yvonne who's hard as nails, and Yvonne calls Kev out constantly. So if Kev calls Adrian Gadrian in the office, Adrian just is mortified and cringes away and doesn't want to have that confrontation. Yvonne will say, "Oi, Kev, you homophobic prick." and then it becomes a bit, and Adrian's actually mortified by that as well. He doesn't want attention drawn to him because he's quite insular at the start of the book. In fact, the book is actually about his maturing and a coming of age in lots of ways. So we do see him pushing back more and more as the book goes on.
Yeah, he's called him something.
Yeah.
Like recently in the thing, and you were like, go Adrian.
Yeah, exactly. And I held that back. So at the beginning, I have him thinking those insults in his head, and then at one point he's just like, nah. And that's the start of him. His shell, self-protective shell, starts to crack, which is good, really satisfying. Actually, I enjoyed writing those bits.
Donna has said, this is a good question. She said, if you rang your best friend and said you'd been arrested, what would they assume you'd done? My best friend would be with me. So I wouldn't be ringing her. The reason I was in the trouble.
Really bad driving, probably. Like shockingly bad driving. I would have got a bit confused and gone round a roundabout the wrong way. I think I'm quite a good driver, actually. Others may not agree, but it would be something related to incompetent use of a machine.
Fair enough. And I just think it'd be my best friend's fault, whatever it was. She'd be there with me and it'd be her fault, like we were in it. I'd have got along with her. She'd probably say the same thing. Sally Ann wants to know, if you were a victim of a crime, who would you call first, Lola or Sheila?
It would depend what crime. Suggest a crime, Sally Ann, and I will give you the answer.
Because you said on Wednesday that you are going back to the Lola series, because I've read one of those. And need to go back and read more.
Have you read this one?
Yes.
Murder on Sky. So that's number 4. So the first one is Murder in the Gallowgate. And there's a 5th one out next month, which is called Murder at Ardagh Castle, which is a little bit different. It's like, what would Lola do if she was in a haunted castle overnight in a storm and there's a murderer and a lot of dysfunctional people. So that was a lot of fun. Has Sally Ann suggested a crime?
Not yet.
All right. Okay. Well, let me think. I would probably call Lola because Sheila gets involved in resolving complex, messy situations, not because she's a detective. She wouldn't want to be a detective. She just wants to put things right. So I think if I rang Sheila, she would probably say, I'm sorry, I'm too busy. I've got enough on my plate. Whereas Lola, I think, would be really, really in there and she wouldn't be able to stop herself. She would certainly calm me down. Lola would be very good at that. Sheila could interview me on her TV program about what it was like.
Yeah, no, we still haven't had a. That is a good answer though. We didn't get a suggestion of a crime. Ooh, what other questions do I want to ask you that people have asked? Donna also said, have you found yourself using a particular method of murder more than any other, or do you like to use as many different ways as possible? That feels like a question that you shouldn't get asked on a.
Oh gosh. I don't like using guns because guns are actually hard to come by, and people know they're hard to come by. I'm just thinking about the methods of murder. Sorry, I'm just looking at my books on the table next to me and thinking. Do you know I like a good garroting with a cord, a wire, something, or a rope, maybe a pair of shiny stockings. I do like a garroting because it's nice and quiet. Quite a few of my quite a few of the victims in my books have plummeted from a great height. I don't know what that's about. I'll have to think about that a bit more. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I'm that conscious of choosing. It just seems to be the right method. You know, I know that Agatha Christie was really fond of poison, and she really understood poison because she was a trained dispensing chemist. So she knew what strychnine would do to someone in what time and what it could be eaten with, so it would be disguised. I'm too lazy to do that much research. I just fling people off the top of something.
Is that why you? And not the laziness, because I don't know about. You've got quite a few books out, so I can't imagine that you're lazy. Is that why you kind of like having non-police kind of investigators as well, so you don't have to go deeply into the.
I mean, I do the research. I usually come up with plots and test them out with police contacts. I do quite a lot of research actually, but I tend to focus in very closely on the bits of information that I need. It was very liberating writing the Sheila and Adrian book, Lollipop Man, and the second one, because the police aren't. We're not seeing things from the police's point of view. The police are there because crimes have been committed, but they're almost secondary characters so that my characters can push back against them and you know, get there first and go. They can go AWOL and break the rules and do things that police would be too sensible to do. Lola is quite a maverick, having said that. So there are things that Lola does. Lola's constantly getting into, you know, she's constantly having talkings to from her superiors, but she's very good at her job and she's very, you know, a lot of my characters are just really trying to do the right thing. They really want to make the world a better place and not to cause harm to other people. And that's true of Lola, it's true of Sheila, it's true of Adrian, but they don't always get it right. And quite often when you try very hard to do the right thing, you can actually make things worse for yourself, but you can also make situations worse. So there's something that Adrian does, as you will know, Kaz, having read a bit today, where he wants to report something that's happened, but for various reasons, he just can't do that. So he sort of half reports it and causes a train of events that lead to a great deal of trouble for him. So I'm quite interested in the moral tension between trying to do the right thing and making a right hash of stuff at the same time. and you're becoming more and more stressed and anxious about it. And that causes a kind of vicious circle where things sort of spiral. And that's really helpful when you're writing a story, because you need the pace to get faster and faster as you get towards the end. So by the halfway point, things should be spiraling, I think, and the reader should not be able to put the book down by that point. That's my plan.
It's a very readable book. I think what I like at the moment so far in it are all the kind of side characters that are not like Sheila and Adrian are brilliant, and the plot, the main sort of story is really interesting, but I kind of like his relationships with like Gav and like his trips to the bar where his friends are and all those kind of things as well. They're as interesting in their own way, if you know what I mean. Like how he's interacting with those people.
I'm glad you've said that. It's you're trying to give people, you're trying to make characters three-dimensional, show different parts of their lives while still keeping the story going. It's very tempting to go off and write a lovely scene that shows the characters, but actually, is it moving the story forward? So that's the challenge. That's, if you can crack that, you can get a compelling story, basically. But I had real fun writing some of the characters, like Mrs. Wormley's daughter, and Dee Thompson. You've probably not got to Dee yet, but
I know, I've got to Dee. Yeah.
Dee's pretty full on, and I had real fun writing those characters, and they just come out, they just pop up, and it sort of keeps things interesting for me as well.
Yeah, Mrs. Wormley's daughter's like terrifying, isn't she?
She's brutal. Yeah, she's brutal, and she runs a hairdressing salon. But she's really, and all the girls who work there are absolutely terrified of her. But yeah, I really enjoyed writing Sharon Wormley. Hope
I'm
people
terrified of
her. She's really aggressive as well. She's really angry. Poor Sharon Wormley. I wonder what happened to her.
Do you said that the next book is going to be set more in Leeds, and you were talking about having a bit more of the goth kind of culture and stuff. Is that because he is going to go off and we're going to see more about Gav and things in the second book?
So Adrian's best friend Gav, at the beginning of Lollipop Man, he's away at university, but he's having a miserable time, and he comes back at the beginning, which is really good for Adrian because he's got a pal. Gav is a goth, so he lives in Hebden Bridge. He wears white-out makeup, his hair's dyed black and it's huge, and he's got like eyeliner on, and he wears like a Russian-style trench coat, and he smells of patchouli oil. And he doesn't care. I mean, he Adrian's terribly self-conscious, but he's very conventional, really. His hair's slightly long, that's it. Whereas Gav is like a real role model for Adrian. But yeah, Gav's great aspiration is to live in Leeds as well, because Leeds was the centre of goth culture. I read a book called The Book of Goth by Cathy Unsworth, and there's a whole chapter in there about how Leeds became this underground center of this alternative culture in the late 70s, 80s, early 90s. And there was a bar in a shopping center called the Merrion Center, which you will know, Kaz. And the Merrion Center is very 1960s. And there was a door in the middle of the center, and it was bar phono. It was called Le Phonographique before that. And you went through the door and down steps into this sort of back cave, this sort of cellar. And I've been talking to a guy who was very, he used to DJ at the Phono, and he still does goth nights now. And he's great, and he's going to take me on a tour next time I'm in Leeds. He's going to take me around Headingley and around all the bars that I was too chicken to go to when I was younger. But yeah, there's more of a goth scene. I mean, Leeds was really quite an alternative city. There were communes in Leeds, and there was a big feminist pushback against Peter Sutcliffe and Reclaim the Night Marches. It was really quite an alternative city. It even had its own very left-wing newspaper called the Morning Star. Not the Morning Star, the Northern Star. The Northern Star, which a friend of mine used to write for. So yeah, really interesting place to write about, and really good fun to write about it 30 years ago, because I was there, but it's fictional as well, and it's quite good fun thinking, well, who would have had a mobile phone? You'd have had to fax something.
Use pages.
Fax.
Like, yeah, you've got CFAX mentioned in the thing, and I was like, oh, who remembers CFAX anymore? Late 90s Phono Bar.
Yeah.
When I moved back for university, I have lots of good memories.
Oh, so you've been there?
Oh yeah, loads of times. It was one of our favourite places to go for a night out.
So the nearest I got to the phono was the Pig and Whistle, which was the old man's pub just outside next to the Morrisons. I'm jealous. I'm jealous. Well, I've written a couple of scenes in the phono and I've sent them to, well, I will be sending them to Dan. He's going to just check them out. But I have been looking at photos, and I also went on the Facebook group, La Phonographique. There's a Facebook group. It's got a lot of people on it. And I said, give me your memories of the phono in the mid-90s. And people told me loads of stuff.
I have a distinct memory that you didn't go in the girls' loos alone
Right.
in there because there was always weird things happening.
Oh, right.
But,
yeah, they don't go in the loos. They go and I think there's a gig in one scene, another one they just go for Snakebite and Black, and there's loud music and dancing.
Which
and
is a proper old-fashioned thing as well, isn't it? It's like there's so many things I'm reading in the book that I'm like, I remember dimly from when I was a student, people drinking things like Snakebite and Black, but
oh yeah, Snakebite and Black. So for those who don't know, it's lager and cider, half and half, and then a squirt of blackcurrant to take the edge off it. And also, to sweeten it and give you the sugar rush as well. The other things we used to drink were like Mad Dog 2020, which was like really bright neon colors, and Hooch, which was this sort of bright green fortified lilt, I think.
Yeah, it's an Alco Pop, wasn't it? It was like Wicked and things like that.
That's what Alco Pops, yeah. I think they've banned Alco Pops. Of course, what we've got now is energy drinks, but that Alco Pops were like, it was like drinking Fanta that was full of vodka and sugar and caffeine.
It was a very 90s thing. There was another nightclub in Leeds that we used to quite like when we weren't being rocky, that was like under the railway station, and that used to sell like Alco Pops for like 2 for £1.
Was that the Cockpit?
No, I've been to I've got fond memories of the Cockpit too.
Which one do you mean?
Oh no, not under the railway. It was under the Queen's, near the Queen's, like the railway slap bit. It was called Planet Earth when we used to go.
Oh, yes, Planet Earth. Yes. I know what you mean. Yeah. And then Majestic opened on the other corner as well.
Yeah, that was a cinema though for a while, wasn't it? Like my dad says it was a cinema.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Majestic at one point. So maybe he's wrong.
No idea.
But yeah, no, the Cockpit is that was a proper nice. Well, it wasn't nice, but it was another one of those old weird alternative venues, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's shut now as well.
I know. Everyone just stays in on their phones.
No one goes clubbing anymore.
That was another reason I wanted to write the books, really. In my mind, the 90s was a really nice decade. It was peaceful. There was quite a lot of peace going on. The Berlin Wall had come down. I remember lots of festivals. There was Cool Britannia, the Spice Girls. There was quite an upbeat feeling, especially in the later part of the 90s. I don't remember it as being as uncertain and unsettling to watch the news as it is now. Put it that way.
No, I think you're right.
So there's some nostalgia element to it for me, and that's why I listened to a lot of 90s music while I was writing the book, to really get me into thinking, this is the music I was hearing when I went out and about.
Do you have a playlist for the book?
Yeah, I do. And it's called, just one second, it's on Spotify, and it's called Lollipop Man, an early 90s playlist. So I'll give you some examples of what's on there. You Got to Let the Music, Capella. You Got to Let the Music. Rhythm of the Night, Corona. Mr. Vane, Culture Beat. What is Love, Hadaway. And then there's some sort of real trancy stuff as well, like Jam and Spoon. And there's also Take That, because Take That were around in 1993. There's some very early Take That. There's some bits of Madonna, New Order. I had great fun. So you can download that or save it if you've got Spotify. Lollipop Man, an early 90s playlist. And that's 3 hours of banging tunes. So if I need to, if I need to wake myself up, I will listen to that, and my heart rate goes up and I feel happy.
And it must help when you're writing it and centering it in those like communities that you know so well with the research, because you must automatically know what kind of 90s, I don't know, Halifax and Bradford were like.
Yeah, I can shut my eyes and I can see them, and I'm probably getting stuff wrong, but the feel of a place is what I'm most interested in. Really, it's quite a broad brush thing where I think, what was it like walking from Bradford Interchange through, up to Forster Square or something at that time of night? What would I hear? What would I see? What could I smell? The same in Leeds. Walking from the St John Centre down to the McDonald's on Briggate, that sort of thing. I can smell the McDonald's, and I kind of see what I was wearing, and then that helps me to connect with the characters. So I found it quite straightforward to connect with the characters. The only thing is just remembering that they did not have the tech and they didn't have the access to information. But that's really helpful when you're plotting, because people couldn't find things out fast. So that creates tension.
No, it's when we were going back to talking about things like Peter Sutcliffe, my dad was saying he worked on like the computer that they were processing things with. It was one of the old card like machines and things like that. So there wasn't a lot of places that were using high tech. I can remember my brother having a mobile phone like first in our family, because he worked at an estate agent's.
But from my research, what I'm finding is when people had them, they were only then contacting the office or a colleague, because most people didn't have them. And it was also really expensive. It was like 50p a minute to use a mobile phone. I think you paid 50p the minute someone answered as well. But it wasn't until the late 90s that people started to get them for personal use and could keep in touch with each other. But really, they were used for emergencies. Like you would keep one in the car.
Yeah, in case you needed it. I think I had one when I went to university for emergencies.
Yeah. I had a pager, which is so weird to think about now. So if somebody wanted to contact me, they had to ring a call center and dictate a message to an operator who would type it and sometimes get the words wrong or spell things wrong. And then my pager would buzz and say, ring home or something. And then I would go to a payphone and ring the landline. So that sort of thing is helpful in terms of plotting as well. Now, the police didn't have mobile, they had radios, but they didn't have mobile phones until, I'm told, about 2001. And they would have pagers, but they would all know where the payphones were. So, or they would ask a household, I need to use your phone. It's bizarre to think about, and it's only 30 years ago.
And yet it still would be classed as historical crime fiction now. Yeah, like it's something like, because it's like enough in the past to be considered history.
Is it?
Apparently, in terms of crime fiction, yes. In terms of fiction, yes. I would say not. As someone who remembers the 90s, definitely.
Yeah. You see, I don't know where the cutoff is, but that's quite interesting. It's particularly interesting because historical crime fiction is popular. would there be any point in tagging this as historical crime fiction? I don't know. It feels strange to me to do that because I remember it, and it makes me feel old. I think historical crime fiction would be if I was writing something in the 50s at the latest,
or the 20s, like you were hinting at.
So I'm writing, I'm working away, tinkering with a series set in the 1920s, and that is a challenge. But the other thing is there's nobody around who remembers it to correct me. But I do want to try and get it right. So I'm doing quite a lot of research into it's the first one is set in Amalfi, the Amalfi Coast south of Naples in Italy. And I was wanting a jazz bar, but there weren't any jazz bars in Naples. And I've researched that, and I've been to Naples as well. There were different types of bars that had music in, but jazz wasn't really a thing, not in 1925. But I do want to be as, I want the book to have integrity. I want it to be a good story, but I want it to resonate with people who would know about that sort of thing, so that people can sort of experience. It's a bit like virtual reality. Reading this book, you'll get a good detective story, but you'll also get a sense of what it was like in the 1920s.
You do make the odd sort of bit up, though, don't you? Like, although they're rooted in real places, you do kind of invent, like, little bits of areas and things. Because I think there's a bit where they go up on the moor, and I don't think it's a real place at all. I think you've just invented like the little village one.
I invented a couple of towns because these communities are so small and people do know places, and I didn't want to offend or frighten people. So Halifax and Bradford and Leeds are real. Huddersfield is real. They go to Huddersfield. But yeah, I did make up some towns, and I will make up streets, and I will make up roads that connect places. Again, partly because the subject matter. But that happens on telly all the time. But do you know, some readers are really merciless when you make places up, and they will tell me that to my face, and I just sort of grin and say, well, none of it's real, and I try and explain why. But I've had reviews where people have been really quite upset that I invented a peninsula on Skye. But I couldn't have it in a real village on Skye, because there are villages in Skye where only 6 people live, and people would think, well, and also the other thing is, because of the way the islands are in the Scottish Islands, there are maybe 3 main surnames on Skye: MacLeod, MacDonald, and McKinnon. So the minute I have a character called Ailey McKinnon, there will be someone called that. In fact, there'll probably be 5 people called that. And I need to be really careful and make place, sometimes judiciously make places up, but at the same time, I will have them go to real places, so it does make sense. But that is a challenge.
I totally get why you've done it. It makes sense, and I can see why, especially when we talked about how communities still feel about some things, that you would not put even fictional things in them. But yeah, I think it's quite interesting. Like, how you blend them together is quite interesting, because they don't feel like you're reading it and you've made it up, even if you know the area. Like, I feel like I know this area fairly well. I've lived here a while, but like I'm sort of trying to work out the bits you've made up, if you know what I mean, because most of them just feel real.
Good. That's what I want. I basically want you to be sort of reading it and think, is that real? And looking on a map, because it might be real. So yeah, I mean, Val McDermid did a book called A Place of Execution, which was a standalone. It was a dual timeline one, and it was set somewhere like Holmfirth or Huddersfield, that sort of area. But it was at the time of the Moors murders. And so she referenced that investigation away from the story. So the characters in the book will reference it. And David Peace did it as well with Peter Sutcliffe in his 1974, 1977, 1981, and 1983, I think they're called, where there is a sort of Peter Sutcliffe-like character in it, haunting the community, but it's not real as well. It's a sort of version of reality. And I think it's really important to be very sensitive about these and not salacious, because Kev, who works for the Calder Valley Advertiser, he would be salacious. But I want to be more like Sheila and sensitive to the pain.
Yeah, really, it's people like Sheila and the others in it that are going to help the community to heal from the events and to find out what's happening.
Yeah, she's a force for good. Sheila is a force for good. She may make mistakes, but she is a force for good.
She's very self-aware as well, isn't she? So she's being the force for good, but people are questioning her motives for being involved, and she's quite self-aware of that sort of questioning, which I think is quite interesting. Like, she knows that people are going to think she's doing it for a certain reason.
To center herself in this media circus, and that's painful for her. But in order for her to move on and make amends for what she did in the past, she has her own shadows. She has to push through that, and she is very self-reflective, and struggling, actually. But that gives her drive as well to try and make things better. And Adrian's doing the same thing. So really, although you've got an 18-year-old lad and a 46-year-old TV presenter, they are quite they're sort of both, their arcs are quite linked, and that was deliberate. So
Donna wants to know if you're doing any real life actual in life events over the spring or summer.
Oh, the Bradford Literary Festival. Yeah, I'm doing that in Bradford at the end of June, and I'm doing a launch in Glasgow this coming week on Thursday, and books will be for sale. Contact me if you're around and want to come. What else am I doing? I'm going to Harrogate, and I will probably have the dog 1 or 2 days. He'll stay with my brother, but I might bring him along to the tent for a day because he's always very popular, and I'm shy, so it breaks the ice. He's not shy.
No, he's not, but he is very nice.
He is.
Bradford Literature Festival, genuinely one of my favorite literature festivals in the world that you can go to. It's amazing.
And I'm on a panel with I think Liz Mystery, M.W. Craven. So I shall be quite intimidated, I think.
I wouldn't be.
No.
They're both really nice.
Good.
They'll be fine.
I haven't met them. As I say, I'm quite shy, but the event's already sold out apparently. So
that's good, because I didn't think they put out the program yet.
I'm sure it says sold out. I'll have to double check.
But yeah, you'll have a lovely time with that.
Good.
Sarah said she loved meeting you and Rasmus in person at Harrogate.
Yes. Well, he'll be there again, Sarah. Obviously, but obviously Rasmus is the main attraction.
Donna's going to look into something this year, possibly Bradford Lit Fest, because every year I'm like, oh, I go every year and it's so good.
Good.
And they always have such a great selection of things. I went to a really amazing one last year, like a talk about two-tone records. And all the, kind of really great stuff like the Selector and the specials and things, the guy written like a history of it. That was like really good.
Cool.
As well as the crime things, I went to there's a couple of crime days, isn't there? So I went to like a few crime events, but
do you know I need to look into it a bit more because it's one of those things where I went, oh yes, I'd love to do that, and then I'm waiting for more information, but I need to work out what I want to go and see as well.
Oh, there'll be loads that you'll want to go and see. They do a schools program as well,
Good.
which is good. Like,
Yeah.
I think they get some authors involved with.
Yeah, that's great.
So you haven't been asked for that, maybe. Donna's definitely feeling Bradford Lit Fest. She's hoping she can travel a bit more because she's down south.
Yeah.
So she doesn't get to. She was sort of trying to see if you're going north, like south of Watford.
Not yet, but
That'd be a very long drive for you, though, wouldn't it? From Scotland down.
Well, I'm going to the Agatha Christie International Festival weekend in April in Torquay, so it's possible. I'm just going as a punter, and I'm going to the gala dinner. I'm obsessed with Agatha Christie, and Victoria Dowd is going, and she said come and be her dinner guest. And there's an unveiling of a new statue of Agatha Christie. Now Torquay's absolutely lovely, so I can't wait for that. And I'm going on the train, and it's 10 hours, so that's dedication for you.
That is, when I go down to Devon, I fly.
Do you? Well, I looked at that. I did look at flying, but you can't from Glasgow, so I think I'd have to go to Manchester to fly. Ugh, so why not just sit on a train and write my books?
I have a stupidly tall husband who complains about trains and things, so we tend to fly. It's short.
It is short, yeah.
I've been to Agatha Christie's house down there, like Greenway.
Greenway, yes, I went there as well. It's wonderful, isn't it? It's really, God, I'm obsessed with Agatha Christie. So really excited about going and just immersing myself in Agatha Christie. I'm so obsessed with Agatha Christie that when I was, how old was I? When I was 18, I got a job as a wine waiter at the Old Swan in Harrogate, which is where Agatha Christie went when she was missing for 9 days. So I could poke around the back, and God, you know, it wasn't the worst job I've ever done. I've done some horrible jobs. It was pretty bad. And I hated it, and I lasted a day. But you know, I got to poke around the back of the Old Swan. So
you achieved the main goal.
Yes, and I even went in the bedroom that she is thought to have stayed in. Somebody took me up and showed me in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's what a story to finish on. You've got 2 minutes left. Remind people, if they haven't already bought it, because it is quite new out, what they're going to go away and buy.
It's out. It was out yesterday. It's The Lollipop Man.
So did I get my copy early?
You got it 1 day early.
Oh.
Yeah. Of course, my mum got one of the first copies because when I got mine, I had to send my copy down. But yes, it's Alison and Busby in all good bookshops, including online. And if anybody uses Fox Lane Books, which is an online indie bookstore, she has signed copies available. So foxlanebooks.co.uk. But if you read it and you like it, please do review it. If you don't like it, that's fine. Just don't review it.
Only good review. Do you have a particular place you like reviews leaving?
Amazon, probably, because that's the only place I'm brave enough to go. I'm not brave enough to go to the other places.
It's oh, hang on, let's just read what people are saying to finish. Sarah said thanks for an entertaining chat. Fran says thanks both. She's really enjoyed it. Donna's going to check it out because of the 90s connection and the playlist as well as everything else, and try and nab you for a signed one at Harrogate.
Oh, great! Yeah, great. Oh, I don't know if they'll be on sale at Harrogate, but I hope they will be. I don't know how that works. But anyway, I'll be hanging about. So come and say hello.
And Laura's added it to her author chat Kindle mountain.
Oh, fabulous! Thank you. Yeah, I know all about to be read piles, virtual ones and real ones.
My real one's ridiculous. It collapsed last night and made my husband think something bad had happened.
Yeah.
Sort of books hitting the floor.
I've got a footstool that's just covered in this tower of books, and I just have to gently close the door and not think about it. Good. I hope if people read the book, I hope you really enjoy it.
They will enjoy it. It's really good.
Thank you, Kaz. Let me know what you think about it when you finished it as well.
Will do. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.